Yeah, thank you, Iga, for having me. That's really nice. We were talking 11 years ago. It was the first time we worked together. Yeah, so I was thinking a lot. Usually, when I have to give a talk, I tend to make slides and, be perfect. And I'm trying a lot, and I will talk about this a bit in the end of my small talk, to get a bit away from this perfectionism tendency that I have. So I was thinking a lot what to tell, how I arrived to, let's say, the work that is in the gallery. Because a lot of times I'm asked this question, how do you arrive to do the work that you do, or the concept that you're using? And it has been a bit of a journey to understand all the pieces that kind of came together to make me wanting to talk about all these topics. So for once, and I'm pretty sure about this right now, I did 10 years of synchronized swimming, and I never thought this was relevant. I always felt like this was another life I had. But it actually, it's a sport that requires cloning almost, you have to be lots of people looking as close as possible to each other. And that caused also a lot of control over my physical body. I needed to, eat a certain amount of food so that my body tends to grow, so I had to be very strict in what I was eating, and it was lots of effort, lots of sport, but I was never good. I don't know why I stayed 10 years. I was not elastic enough, I was not good enough, I was always tired, it was really an effort. And so I think all this body, this control over the body, over my physical body, kind of stayed actually with me. And so that's one reason why I worked a lot with virtual bodies in a way that are glitched, they are imperfect, if you want, in a way. But for me, because they are so imperfect, because they're so glitchy, they feel so free. So I'm actually almost jealous of all these avatars I'm creating, because they get to be something I cannot be. And then on the other side, all this obsession over not only the body, but also on the avatar, more or less at the time where I stopped synchronized swimming and kind of started to use computers a bit, I fell in love with Second Life, but in a very, I guess, uncommon way. So I was not in Second Life for socializing. I was actually having my little house up in the sky, away from everyone. I was just there with my avatar, and I was just buying things for my avatar, and I would change shape every day, change colors of the hair every day, and clothes and styles and whatnot, and it was so almost like this hypnotic thing. So I stayed so many hours in Second Life that sometimes it was more hours there than in the physical world. And at one point I decided to stop because, it happened something very stupid. I was going to, switch on Second Life with my cup of tea at the time, and the cup fell on the floor, and my hand went automatically doing Command Z. And in the air. And I thought, okay, I need to stop being online or virtually too much, and I need to kind of, go back to reality. But somehow I started to understand, online and virtual world and virtual avatar as actually not something that is separated from me, is part of me, it's not a game, it does have an effect and an affect to me and, to the people around me when I meet someone online. So on one side, it's a very, all my practice is a very almost therapeutic practice of me dealing with these bodies and these limitations of my physical body and the freedom that my avatar gets through, through the virtual. But on the other hand, it has a more open topic of caring about virtual bodies as they are bodies, they are part of us. And so there is these two aspects that I constantly look at when I do art. So maybe I did start, my background comes from interactive art, so I did a lot of interactive installations. So the body was always there as, the first input to the work. But around 2015, I started to look at the devices that I was using for interaction. At the time was the Kinect camera, that I was just using to track people, position, the movement. I started to look at them as actually devices for 3D scanning, for capturing something physical and bringing it to the virtual. And I was a student, no money, alone in my flat. So that was the body I had to test. And And I always took a lot of selfies, but I never published really selfies. It's more for me. I don't know, it's like this kind of archiving of myself changing. And so I had this idea of using 3D scanning in the similar way, because then it's not only one, frontal picture or whatever, but it can incorporate all aspects of my body. And I realized very quickly my physical body once again has limitations. So when let's say this is the 3D scan, when I scan myself, well, then at one point I can't scan anymore my back, or one arm is always used and always moving, so it does not get captured. And so I get results like this, where I don't know if you can see a lot, but like my back is always a hole. My arms are most of the time missing, and at that time the software that I was using did something beautiful that unfortunately softwares today, like apps on the phones, don't do anymore, which is inventing missing skin. So all my back in this picture, for example, is the colors of my socks that were kind of spreaded in the parts that the scanner didn't recognize. And so I started doing almost obsessively all these kind of selfies, 3D scanning selfies. And at that time, I didn't have the knowledge of creating augmented reality or whatnot. So I was just showing them as virtual sculptures on tablet, but I always felt they were kind of lost or trapped into these devices. And so from 2015, I kind of continued this, 3D scan selfies process until I got my iPhone that can 3D scan and realized, oh, actually, I can make really good scans of myself by myself now. And that was disappointing almost, because I didn't want me to be there. I wanted the glitch, I wanted the freedom. And so for the projects that I have in the gallery, which is part of like this ongoing series called Untouched, I had to figure out new ways of creating these free avatars. And so what I'm doing is I'm using this 3D scanning app, and I'm moving very quickly while 3D scanning, so it's like a bit of a chaos. And then I'm surprised by what comes out. And this, for example, that you see here, like my movement managed to capture like my three heads kind of moving down, but also the light changed from where I was standing to where I went down, so also the light of my skin kind of changed in this movement. And I call it untouched because I do not touch the result. The only thing that I do is just convert the point cloud to mesh, so that I can then show it as an augmented reality. So the main project is online, is a web AR. Anyone that goes to my website or scan the QR code in the gallery can access those selfies. And for me, it's a bit of a way to give them a new home. So you can bring them wherever you like. You can place them wherever you like. So I somehow get to be any place at any time through my avatars that I would never be able to allow, like maybe in private, rooms or I don't know. Sometimes some people send me photos from my avatar being in Paris, and I was in Vienna, in the grey, cold Vienna. So it's really nice to know that they get to have a life. And all these projects, like all this 3D scanning, are part of this, this research on like virtual sculpture. But I also started in 2016 to work on, virtual reality, and kept this interactivity that I had as a background. So, for example, I'm just gonna jump to. This was my first VR project, Plug Your Nose and Try to Hum. I'm just gonna play shortly, maybe the video documentation. So I kept the basics of how I was creating interactive art, which was always having only a focus on the entity or the elements that you could interact with. And in this particular VR work, when you wear the headset, you are surrounded by really miniature, tiny clones of myself that keeps cloning all the time and float all around you. And my idea was to try to figure out how people would perceive those virtual bodies. So what you can do is just look. If you are a nice person, you just look at those bodies. But you have controllers, so you can touch, you can push them gently, you can grab them, you can throw them, you can stretch them, so you can increasingly get more and more violent towards those bodies. And it was really interesting for me to see when I was in the exhibitions, how people, a bit what Lauren said before, like how people react to those bodies. And it's really interesting to see how most of the time women were very gentle or even afraid of, getting too close. Younger people were, just thinking of them as a game, so they were just like throwing. So I'm still not sure what is the best, installation or setup for this project that allows this body to be treated appropriately, which is with care. But I also started to think about this idea of so those are meshes, so per se are like static 3D objects that then I animate through gravity, through physics, through animations and whatnot. And so I see them as some sort of performative virtual sculptures. That's what I started to think about, this concept of sculptures in the virtual that become performative through interactions of the user or through their interactions with their environment. In this case was, for example, the gravity. I'm just seeing if I can show you maybe. So, for example, this was a project, it was commissioned by the House of Elektronische Kunst for their online series of networks. And they asked me if I could do a work that would be only online. And it was the time in the 2021, lockdowns. I was at home, mainly in my bedroom, with the computer all the time, or doing Zooms, or being on virtual spaces. And time was passing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make a performative virtual sculpture that just exists online. I hope that I can show it to you from here. And it was a bit tricky for me because I knew that was something that everyone would see by accessing the same link. So they would open the project, everybody would see one thing that is the same for everyone, but I wanted to create a very unique experience for whoever enters that webpage. And so what I did was creating a sort of virtual clock, if you like. So whenever you open the page, depending on the local time zone you're in, that would be the amount of bodies that would exist in the 3D scan bedroom. So now it's 2 o'clock, so there should be 14 bodies. And they are randomly affected by gravity. That means every time I personally, like me in this computer, open the web page, gravity will randomly be assigned. So sometimes they would float, sometimes they would fall, sometimes they would be very much high up, and it's really hard to interact with. And the only interaction that you can do, I mean, this is now very slow, seems like, is just click and drag them, but they are trapped within this bedroom. And so for me, this kind of became something I wanted to research more and more, how to create those interactive pieces that are per se just this one thing that becomes like some sort of sculpture if you just look at it, but it is also performative. And I did a series of different works. Some of them I can't show you here on the computer. Maybe this one also. This was kind of the same concept I wanted to have. This was my first NFT. And I was not sure. I thought, okay, they forced me to have, I think it was 200 editions. I was like, I don't want to make one project that gets cloned 200 times and it's the same for everyone. This is too boring for me. And so I did, again, one project that is based on randomness, which is something I always use, randomness and things that are a bit out of my control. I don't know if okay, it's here, very tiny. And so what happens is whenever you open the project, there are a fixed amount of bodies that are generated. I can't do anything right now. The virtual sculptures is loading. And all these bodies, they have just one rule, which is being attracted to the center of the screen. So they are being created, they are all forced to go back to the center. And so slowly, once it is fully loaded, they kind of create a sort of sphere with their body, a sphere that moves. So now I can interact with it and I can look at it as a sculpture that is still animated and moves. I can also just be mean towards myself right now and track those bodies. And then with the space button, I get randomly put into the perspective of one of those bodies. And so this kind of become unique, even if there are 200 editions, there are infinite ways of creating the sculpture every time you open the project. And yeah, as a last thing that I wanted to show you, but I will have to switch to my computer, maybe, but maybe not. Let's see. Maybe we can with that. So yeah, lockdown. That was hard, I guess, for everyone. For me, I thought it would not be so hard to be that much online because I was online a lot before also, but it became this constant kind of performing in front of Zoom, on virtual spaces, through virtual avatar. And I realized that because of that, one tendency that I had, which was never really thinking about this physical body that anyway I don't like so much, so my focus was always on my avatars, became the thing. I did not care anymore, I just cared about the online presence that I had. And that became kind of, burnout at one point. I'm still slowly recovering from it, and it made me start thinking about how easy it is to lose yourself when you work so much with virtual elements or in virtual spaces through virtual bodies, how easy it is to forget how to take care of this. And I'm always talking how to take care of them, but not of me. And so I decided to work on one project and see if that works. It's unclear whether that works. So this is a project will premiere in November. It's called I'm Sorry I Made You Feel That Way. And the reason the title is because I created a machine learning algorithm with an amazing team from Antwerp, from Belgium. They helped me develop this project. So I have this avatar that is generated in real time through machine learning that interacts with you. So if you're in front of the webcam, you can become this avatar and interact and move with it. But this avatar is also connected to my physical body data. So I'm checking my level of stress and my tiredness mainly. And those affect the look of the avatar and the interaction. So the more tired I am, the less you will be able as a user to interact with this body. The body will be so tired that cannot react with and to you. And the more stressed I am, the more blobby and abstract the body becomes. And a friend of mine made a bit of a joke and said, okay, you had to make an avatar so that you can finally take care of your physical body, maybe. And unfortunately, I realized these days I'm not taking care so much of myself, so today I'm very tired, very stressed. My avatar I tried this morning is awfully looking. I'm not even going to show it to you. You can't even move. And yes, this project will be premiere. Let's see how it goes. And I also decided to keep working with this idea of creating avatar a bit without so much control on. And so what I'm doing is taking screenshots whenever I'm performing with this machine learning avatar. I'm just taking screenshots now and then of their shape, and then using one tool that transforms 2D image to 3D and creating those very weird, I'm still not sure how I feel about this avatar, but very weird looking bodies. That again you can then bring wherever you like, give them a home in augmented reality. So yeah, that I think was my time. Thank you so much. If you have questions.
Yes, I actually halfway answered my question because I was going to ask you how you are doing all this software programming and how are you learning things? Are you always collaborating with somebody, or you did also hours and hours with your research?
So the project I just showed you is the only one where I actually collaborated with a team. All the other projects are me, myself, alone. Except for the sound parts. So in the projects where I do want and I do need sound, I do collaborate at the moment with my partner, which is a musician, or before with friends that were doing music. But other than that is me. Googling a lot. I spend many, many hours searching how to solve problems, how to do things. And a lot of time I've been asked, why don't I delegate? Why don't I hire an assistant? Why don't I collaborate with people? But it's really hard for me because the way that I work is usually very experimental. I open the software, I try one thing, errors happening because I'm not good at programming, and then I love what happens through the error, and then this becomes the artwork. And it's not a process I can really explain to someone else. So even with this team from Antwerp, it was so hard for them to understand what I wanted. They kept saying, but why don't you just film yourself? And I said, no, I hate this. I want my 3D self to be the avatar. And it was so hard for them. They were also saying, but it's so glitchy. And I said, yes, I love it, you know. So it is not possible for me to just delegate the artistic process, and that means also learning a bit how to program and embrace failure, embrace mistakes. Really, most of my work, not most, but like some of my work come out of just me not being good and writing some line of code wrong, and then something really beautiful happens, and I just love it and I keep it. Yeah.
First, you made these avatars that fly in the space, and the audience, like strangers, are people you don't know, can do with them what they want. And then you go, now with this last project you show, you go a step further and you relate your physical body to this avatar. And so there's this relation, right, with your ring. And I was just now wondering if you ever thought about connecting what then the audience does with this thing back to you. So, of course, that can be a very bad thing, but it could be also, I'm just speculating now, like, is there a way that we collectively care for your body, for example? Like, because I feel that would be, no, I don't know. What is your thoughts on that? And I have another small question.
Something I'm thinking a lot. We were discussing with the team in Antwerp what kind of devices we could use for me to perceive like a physical feedback. But I decided not to do that at this point of my life because I'm still really trying to recover from the burnout, and I guess having, let's say, constant vibrations on my wrist or, you know, on my phone whenever someone is, you know, mean or not mean towards my body, it would just add to. And so it would be kind of a counterproductive feedback of something that should be about care becoming something that just stresses me out constantly. But I do have another project in the pipeline, which is going to take me a bit more too, where it's an online avatar again, and it is connected to my ring again, so it will be affected by. But in that case, how you interact with that body, so the more violent you move it or how you touch it, how many times you open the web page to visit that body, this will affect the body itself. So it will either make the whole project deteriorate or thrive. But it's again something that remains there. I, at that moment, not willing to have a physical reaction on myself from the virtual part, because I do know how users tend to use those bodies. And if I would make sure that, you know, people are always nice with the body, that would be a different story. But because I know most of the time it's not a gentle care, like collective care towards, I'd rather not at this point.
This reminds me of Martina Menegon's work, where she could, like, people could choose if they would, like, take it to anime or, like, which object from the table they would choose to interact with your body.
Yeah, it's a bit mean, I guess, towards, you know, from my side, that I just made my avatars experience all this brutality or violence or weird thing. But in a way, when I'm around, it is affecting me a little bit. But for sure, they have much harder time, my avatar, than I can always leave. They can't really.
But maybe kind of thinking how to make people that are using your avatar be aware that their treatment of your avatar is actually making a real person affect those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. If it could be much clearer. For me, it's always so strange to think when you see, you know, this. For me, I always use like my naked body. It looks so fragile, but it's virtual. It's unbreakable. You know, they are actually the strongest, but they look fragile. And I always thought that should be already enough of a clue or a hint. But just I think it's because still a lot of people perceive the virtual as something there, I can do whatever I want there, nothing happens here. And I think as long as there is this narrative, it is hard for people to understand those as actual body that will have an effect how you play with or how you interact with. But I also think a lot of the time is how I set up the work, the VR work with the little miniature. I always set it up with a huge projection with the VR headset connected, so everyone knew, everyone could see what they were doing, and those were the best interaction. And then just once I couldn't, there was no technical equipment for that, so I only had a small monitor for me to check that it would be working, but it was just a VR headset, and there was this situation of this guy standing just with a controller like this for minutes, and I thought maybe it does not work, so I was just speaking what happens in the VR, and he just had one of my body with the legs spread, and was just there. And I thought, I'm just going to leave the room now, because what kind of interaction can I have with this person after he takes off the VR? So I just left the room, but it does affect, because it's like when you're online, you're anonymous, nobody sees what you're doing, you can do whatever, theoretically.